Hello, and welcome to the presentation on content reading. This is one of two presentations that you need to watch before you take the quiz on both of the presentations. So make sure that you watch the Adolescent Learner as well. Feel free to take notes if you feel like that would help you when taking the quiz, but also keep in mind that with the quiz, you can take it twice. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about content reading. What is it and what's the big deal? Many times in the past, teachers that teach in a content area believe that they do not need to teach any kind of literacy skills. Well, that is part of what is the big deal. So content reading, what is it? Well, according to the DPI, it is a level of reading and writing skills needed to comprehend and respond to ideas in text used for instruction. Our Common Core state standards say that disciplinary literacy is one where students will develop deep conceptual knowledge in a specific discipline by reading, writing, talking, and thinking. I stress the word talking because that is one of the big pieces that tends to be missing in the content areas. And learners in the content areas are expected to be using the toolkit of strategies to be able to understand text. So typically, literacy has been saved for the ELA teachers at the middle school and high school levels. But this has definitely changed with the introduction of the Common Core state standards and the inclusion of the disciplinary literacy strand that is found within. Reading instruction in the content is to help students reach a point where they can use a toolkit of strategies to easily read any text for any reason and understand it. So what's the big deal? Think about why certain teachers teach. Elementary teachers typically go into teaching because they love kids. They love working with kids, interacting with kids. They don't mind the snotty noses or helping them to tie their shoes and things like that. Middle school and high school teachers, they have a passion for their content. They love their content and they want to share that passion with others. So those middle school and high school teachers sometimes don't think about teaching kids to learn because their passion is in the subject and sharing their passion. So they're not thinking about how to get the students to read the text and think about the text and understand the text in the same way that they do. And the challenge at the middle school and high school level in the content reading areas is the support of reading in daily routines, that they're doing something daily that's supporting all of their readers in ways that help them to better access the material that they're going to be diving into. Kind of think of content reading like a triangle with 3 phases of literacy. And what you see on the picture here is you have 2 different triangles. The regular triangle is what the development of what literacy development looks like. The triangle on the right shows that when we get to those upper levels, when we get to the disciplinary literacy, that it tends, you see that you have separate little arrows, and each one of those separate arrows is a specific subject area that teachers at the high school would teach. And those arrows can fluctuate. Some may be longer, meaning that the student is stronger in that subject, and others might be a little shorter, indicating that that student might be weaker in that subject, depending on their interests, their motivation, and how they're being engaged in that subject. So our 3 phases of literacy are pretty basic. You have your, simple I should say. You have your basic level, your intermediate level, and your disciplinary level. Your basic level is your emergent literacy type of level. That's the foundations, the beginnings of reading. If you think back to Marie Clay, it's all the things that she talked about with her concepts of print, learning how to decode, recognizing those high frequency words, starting to make meaning, and just basic phonics. So that basic stage is that learning to read stage. The intermediate stage, you're moving up, and we're thinking this area is more of the upper elementary, 4, 5, 6, those grade levels, where students are exploring more with learning or they're exploring more with learning to read and moving from learning to read to reading to learn. And in that intermediate area, they're grasping the fluency, they're understanding vocabulary development, how suffixes and roots and prefixes, how they all change the meanings of words. They're working with the 7 different strategies. They are looking at different types of text structures and how texts are put together and how you look at each of those a little differently. They're starting to process and think about meaning, and they're exploring different kinds of genres. Then the top level of our triangle is our disciplinary literacy. And this is where the reading to learn is definitely shifted. There is no more of the learning to read. By the time you get to this level, it is all about reading to learn. And this is where we need to fine-tune those strategies to fit the different subjects. It's how well do you read becomes what are you able to read. So they're reading for a purpose, and students become different kinds of readers and writers for different kinds of purposes. They are becoming more independent in their reading, but they still need that mentoring of how to think and read in that discipline. Teachers need to continue to mentor and scaffold so that learning is installed. That gradual release of responsibility still needs to happen at points in the middle school and high school to help them to access the information in those more difficult materials. There has been a huge misconception that once students have mastered the basic and intermediate skills, that they're able to handle easily the complex reading at the middle and high school level without help. But 6th grade and up has that disciplinary literacy addition in the Common Core standards. So just because you are a science teacher, you still need to have some literacy teaching going on. Social studies teachers, math teachers. This is not solely the domain of the English language arts teacher anymore. It is now everyone's domain. So once again, what's the big deal? Well, you have to think about what middle school and high schools lack. And this is not applicable to every single middle school or high school. But typically, most middle school and high schools classes assign reading and then just give the test. There's no instruction on how to tap into the reading. So we need a comprehensive approach to literacy across the curriculum, across all the different curricular areas. The challenge is to instruct and support the 7 strategies of reading: visualizing, questioning, determining importance, making connections, that means using their schema and their background knowledge, synthesizing information, making inferences, and fix-up strategies. We want to support and instruct how to use those independently in the content areas. Many middle schools and high schools need that high-quality professional development on reading. They many times don't get the instruction on how to teach those. They have instruction on their content area and what they need to teach for their content area, but they don't always have that reading instruction on how to help their readers use those strategies in their classes. The resources to address reading problems is typically lacking at the middle school and high school. If we think about it, early intervention is what has been proposed throughout the years. So many of the reading specialists or the teachers that have the strengths in reading are often found at the elementary, and we don't see them so much in the middle school and high school. So therefore, we need to make sure that we have teachers at that middle and high school level that have a strength in reading to be able to support those other teachers in the content areas. We need to make sure that we are having before, during, and after activities that tie to the reading. That's how your engagement is going to happen. You can tell students to read it, and they're going to become one of those 4 readers that I mentioned about if you looked at the adolescent learner. They're not going to grasp the information that you really want them to grasp if you're not including before, during, and after activities that tie to their reading. They're just going to read it and forget it, or they're going to pretend to read it, or they're going to skim and scan. They're not going to dive into what it really means. So the engagement needs to happen through different activities. More modeling and support of how to read text differently needs to happen in the middle school and high school levels. We still need that gradual release of responsibility. I do, we do, you do. When teachers know how to model and support literacy in the subject areas, then they can do our last bullet point here. They can create an environment conducive to helping students achieve fluency. We don't want reading to be laborious for our students. We want them to be able to get through it, but get through it efficiently and fluently. And we need to remember in our content areas that students need to learn how to read the text through a specific lens and prioritize what's important to get the gist of what's reading. So that means you need to teach them, if you're teaching math, how to read like a mathematician. If you're reading science, how to read like a scientist. If you're reading in the social studies area, how to read like a historian. So we need to get our readers to start looking at the material through different lenses so that they can disassemble it, they can synthesize it, they can analyze it so that it makes sense to them. So in our middle school and high schools, there are 5 principles of disciplinary literacy framework. The first one is called knowledge and thinking. Those go hand in hand. You should have knowledge and you should have thinking going on together. Content plus the process equals learning. There's a difference in comprehending versus comprehension. So we need them to understand the content through the process. So we need them to gain that strategic reader idea. Ooh. All right, our second one is apprenticeship, where you need to act as that discipline, act as that historian, that mathematician, that scientist. Show them how to attack the text as that specific person in that discipline. And then have them engaged in the text. Encourage that talk and the writing and the tasks as those types of people. So whatever task you're having them do, have them do it as a historian. Have them do it as a scientist. Have them work through it through that lens that they were reading in. Our third principle is to mentor students. We still need that gradual release of responsibility, and I'm not going to give that up. You've been hearing that through all of the reading courses that you've been taking so far. Gradual release of responsibility should be the basis of your teaching. You need to explicitly teach them those literacy habits that scaffold the content learning and enable students to function on their own. Our fourth principle is instruction and assessment should drive each other. Use those formative assessments and checks to find out where the gaps are in the learning so that you can adjust your instruction to strengthen the understanding. If you see that they already understand a concept, then you should just kind of gleam over it and make sure that they all have some basic understanding, and then you'll be able to dive deeper into the other topics that you need to teach. Or if you find the opposite through your formative assessment, your exit slips, your reflections that you may have the students write, and you find that there's some gaps, and you can reteach it. Figure out a different way to help them to access that information. And our last principle is that the classroom culture socializes intelligence. You need to make sure that your students are actively engaged in your learning. You should have a variety of different activities to get them involved in learning. Lots of talking and collaboration should be happening in your classrooms. It should no longer be all right, you read chapter 5 and answer the 5 questions at the end of the chapter. That's not what we should be hearing in our middle school and high school classrooms anymore. We should hear a buzz of learning with everyone involved and invested in what they're learning about. So once again, make sure that you have watched this slideshow and the Adolescent Learner slideshow, and then take the quiz, which will be open on Wednesday, and will close on Saturday evening.